I'm your host, Davida Shinsky, and you're listening to Live Without Limits Dreams Come True with the Right Mindset. Now, today's show is Your Wounded Inner Child, How to Start the Healing Journey. All of us have an inner child within us that we have to take care of. So, I didn't realize I had a wounded inner child till I was nearly 40 years old. In fact, I thought my childhood had been pretty normal. However, once I started revisiting my past, I realized that I started stuffing my emotions at an early age. Either I didn't know how to express them or didn't feel safe enough to express them. I also forgot a whole lot of what occurred in my childhood. Some say this is due to the repression of memories or cutting off my emotional field. Also, it's that our mind helps us to deal with bad things that happen in our lives by repressing them. And only with therapy do you find out what those are and have to get rid of them. Professionals say that by the age of 6, we've taken in a lot of information. Our personalities have become fairly formed. By then, we've made a lot of assumptions about ourselves, others, and the world around us. Depending on the living situation, those beliefs can be helpful or harmful. So, what was your childhood like? When I was going through a really rough time, going in my mid 30s, I took some time to revisit my childhood. I journal about my parents and some of the things that happened when I was young. In psychology, there's something called the inner child, and this is the little us that grew up experiencing a lot of things. I learned as an adult that I had a wounded child to contend with. There was a little girl who did not get the emotional support that she needed as a young child. And she experienced some very painful and scary things with a father struggling with alcoholism and a mother who struggled with depression. The household was somewhat dysfunctional. My parents were there, but not really emotionally there. They could not love me as healthily as they could because they were dealing with their own unsolved childhood issues. And that's a big thing because in my home, my father was a lawyer, but he grew up in a home that was very abusive, and therefore he abused his children. And my mother also grew up in a home that was very abusive, and therefore she abused her children. My father physically abused, and my mother emotionally and verbally abused. And those were things that followed me into adulthood, and those were things that I learned to overcome and deal with far better than my two sisters have. So, what was your childhood like? Can you remember? Have you ever journaled about it? Have you discussed it with a therapist? Do you think that your inner child is wounded or has unhealed emotional issues? When I really began to realize that my current emotional issues were a product of a lifetime of repressed emotions and things that occurred as a small child, I felt a twinge of hope that I could get through the dark night of my soul. If you don't think your wounded child is impacting your adult life, think again. Forgiveness. First, I had to forgive myself for blaming me for things that happened. Clearly, not everything in my, is my fault. I felt responsible for many people's happiness as a child. I wanted everyone around me to be happy, and I did what I could to try and make that happen. Throughout life, I had to forgive myself for that. Other people's happiness is not my responsibility. It's a trait that I picked up along the way because I wanted attention and affection so badly. I was love starved. That trait trickled over into my adult life. I began looking at my wounded child with compassion. I also began taking responsibility and doing away with the victim mentality. I began to nurture my wounded child and let her know that she is now safe and so very loved. Your wounded childhood affects you later. Many adults don't think that their childhood has an impact on them later in life. Just look at the millions of people struggling with addiction. Many of them are really contending with a wounded child and a dysfunctional or traumatic childhood that they have not really dealt with at the core level. Okay, I think I'm going to have to redo this because I don't want that. I hate when that happens. Yes? What is this about?